Welcome students to part 2 of our lecture on planning. Those students who have not watched the part 1, I request you to please watch the part 1 first, then you can watch the part 2. Okay, let us start. In part 1, we have discussed the meaning, the features, characteristics and importance of planning. And in part 2, we will be discussing the limitations of planning and the process of planning. Now, in spite of so many importance of planning, in spite of so many benefits of planning for the organization, planning has some limitations. Now, the first limitation of planning is planning leads to rigidity. A specific plan made in an organization clearly indicates the objective to be achieved and the ways of doing work. Since a manager may not be able to change these plans, it leads to rigidity. Now, in planning, the organization must first have an objective. Now, in order to achieve those objectives, it may be increase in sales or increase in profits or whatever may be the objective of the organization must make plans. What are the actions that they must perform in order to achieve their objectives? Now, once the plan of the organization has been implemented, the manager can no longer change the plans. So, in the future, if there is any changes in the market or in the factors of the business environment, the plans which have been implemented may not work or may even give negative results to the organizations. Okay, so this is the reason why planning leads to rigidity. Okay, next, planning may not work in a dynamic environment. Now, what is the meaning of dynamic environment? We all know that a business environment is very dynamic. What does that mean? It means that the business environment constantly changes or is constantly changing, or we can say the factors which affects the business environment, such as the social factor, the economic factor, the political factor, the legal factor, and so on and so forth, they constantly change. Clear? Now, business environment consists of social, economic, legal, and other factors that keeps on changing. The organization has to adapt itself to such changes, but planning cannot assess future trends exactly and thus fails in a dynamic environment. What happened is, although the organization has created or has made a very promising plans in order to achieve their objectives, that plan may not work in a dynamic environment. Okay, now the organization, in order to make a plan, they must make an assumptions about the future. or they must assess the future. After they have assessed the future, based on their assumptions on what it is going to happen in the future, they will make a plan. Clear? Now, if there are certain changes in the business environment in the future, the plans may not work, which is why planning may not work in a dynamic environment. Next, planning reduces creativity. Planning is an activity which is done by the top level management, and the rest of the members just implement these plans. They are neither allowed to deviate from the plans nor are permitted to act on their own. Due to this, much of the initiative or creativity inherent in managers or other members gets lost or reduced, and there is nothing new or innovative in the organization. Now we all know that planning is usually done by the top level managers, and the middle level managers and the low level managers, they only have to follow the plans which has been laid down by the top level managers. Clear? Now, because the managers in the middle level and the low level, they cannot give their contribution at a time of making a plan. All right, all the innovative ideas, all the new ideas, all the insightful ideas which they have are being constricted or are not being considered by the top level management. Hence, it reduces creativity. Next, planning involves huge costs. It usually involves a lot of time, effort, and cost of the managers. Collection of data, boardroom meetings, investigations, and discussion with experts involves a lot of expenditure of the organization. Sometimes the cost incurred may not justify the benefit derived from the plans. Here, like I have said earlier, that every organization have their specific objectives, right? Now, in order to achieve those objectives, the organization will plan. Now, in order to make a plan, the organization must collect data. After they have collected the data, they have to organize board meetings after meetings. They have to do investigations on whether their plans will work or not, right? And they must also call certain experts, right, to analyze the data, to make a plan for them, and to make sure that the plans which they have made will help them to achieve their objectives, right? Now, in order to do all these activities, the organization will incur a huge amount of cost. Clear? Now, sometimes the cost incurred may not justify the benefit derived from the plans. Okay, next. Planning is a time-consuming process. Sometimes plans to be drawn up take so much time that there is not much time left for their implementation. This leads to failure of planning. Like I have mentioned earlier in the previous point, that planning involves a huge cost. Planning also is a time-consuming process. Because why? Because in order to make a plan, the organization must collect data, have meetings, call experts, evaluate the plans whether they will work or not. Okay. Now, by the time they have finished doing all these activities, it will be a very time consuming process. And sometimes, because they have taken so much time during the planning process, the time which is allotted to implement the plan is very less. And because of this reason, the plans which they have made may not work or may fail. Clear? Next, planning does not guarantee success. Planning does not guarantee success. Success of planning rests on the implementation. Lack of proper implementation may lead to failure of planning. Even if a plan has worked earlier, it may not work again due to changes in the external environment. Now, although the organization has made a very promising plan or a foolproof plan, it does not mean that it will guarantee 100% success. Clear? Until and unless the organization implements the plan very well, the plan will not work. Even if the plan has worked earlier, it may not work again. Why? Because due to the changes in the external environment. So these are the limitations of planning. Let us come to the planning process, or what are the steps involved in planning. Now the first step is setting of objectives. Second is developing of premises. Third is identifying alternative course of actions. Fourth is evaluating the alternatives. Fifth is selecting the best alternatives. Sixth is implementing the plan. And the last step is follow up. Now let us discuss one by one. Now let us come to the first step of planning process. The first step that the organization must follow during the process of planning is setting of objectives. Objectives are end results which the management wants to achieve by its operations. In planning function, the manager begins with setting up of an objective because all the policies, procedures, and methods are framed for achieving the organization objectives only. Objectives must be specific and measurable in terms of units. Objectives are set as an organization as a whole for all departments, and then departments set their own objectives within the framework of organizational objectives. For example, a television company sets the objective to sell 50,000 units next year, which is double the current sales. Now, the first step in any planning process is setting of objectives. Any organization, if they want to make a plan, they must first have an objective. Without an objective, an organization cannot make a plan. Clear? So it is very important for the organization to first have an objectives. Like for example, I have given here a television company sets the objective to sell 50,000 units next year. Such kind of objective the organization must have in order to make a plan. After they have set their specific objectives, then in order to achieve those objectives, they will make their plans accordingly. The objectives of the organization must be very specific and measurable in terms of units. The objectives that the organization has set must be specific or must be measurable in terms of units. Objectives are set as an organization as a whole for all departments, and then the department set their own objectives within the framework of the organizational objectives. Clear? Next, the second step in the planning process is developing premises. Premises refer to making assumptions regarding the future. Premises are the base on which plans are made. Assumptions are made on the basis of forecasting. Common forecasts are made to find out the demand for a product, change in government policies, competition, tax rate, etc. For example, the television company has set the objective of 50,000 units of sale on the basis of forecasts done on the premises of favorable customer demand. Now, after the organization has set their objectives and before they start making the plan, they must have an assumption about the future with regards to various factors such as how much will be the demand in the future, what are the government policies, how will be the competition, how much is the tax rate, and so on and so forth. Clear? It is very important for the organization if they want to make a plan. In order to achieve their desired objective, they must develop a premises. Premises meaning making an assumptions about what is going to happen in the future with regards to various factors such as government policies, such as demands of the customers, such as competition, such as tax, and so on and so forth. Based on the assumptions which the organization has made about the future, they will be able to make the plan. For example, the television company has set the objective of 50,000 units sale on the basis of forecasts done by the premises of favorable customers' demand. If the organization has not developed any premises, they cannot go ahead with the planning process. Okay, next. The third step in the planning process is identifying alternative course of action. After setting up an objective, the manager must make a list of alternative course of action through which the organization can achieve its objective. As there may be many ways to achieve their objective, and managers must know all the ways to achieve the objective. For example, if the objective is to increase the sales by 10%, then the sale can be increased by adding more lines of product, by offering discount, by increasing more expenditure on advertisement, or by appointing salesman for door-to-door sales, etc. Clear? Now, after the organization has set up an objective and they have made an assumptions about the future or they have developed a premises, The next step for organization they must do is they must identify alternative course of action which will help them in achieving their desired objective. For example, if the objective of the organization is to increase the sales by 10%, okay, if the objective of the organization is to increase the sale by 10%, then there are many ways which the organization can do in order to achieve that objective of theirs. Clear? For example, which has been given here is, in order to increase the sale by 10%, then the organization can do this by many ways. By adding more lines of products. If the organization now is selling television, then now they can sell cell phones also, mobile phones. Okay, by offering discount or by increasing more expenditure on advertisement, the organization can opt for more advertisement so that people will come to know about the product and will buy their product, or by appointment of salesman for door-to-door sales. Yes, no, they will appoint a salesman and they will tell the salesman to go from door to door or from houses to houses to sell the products. Okay, so these are the various actions that the organization can take in order to increase the sales by 10%. Okay, now in the third step of the planning process, the organization must identify all the alternative course of action in order to achieve their desired objectives. Clear? Next. Step number 4. Evaluating the alternatives. After making lists of various alternatives along with the assumption supporting them, the manager starts evaluating each and every alternative and notes down the positive and negative aspects of every alternative. After this, the manager starts eliminating the alternative with more or negative aspect and the one with the maximum positive aspect and with the most feasible assumption is selected as best alternative. After the organization has listed down the various alternatives in order to achieve the desired objective, the next step for the organization is to evaluate those alternatives. Okay, the organization will take each and every alternative and evaluate them, and it will write down the negative and the positive points of each and every alternative. Like for example, which I have given to you earlier, for increasing the sales by 10%, if you want to increase the sales by 10%, then the organization have many alternatives such as increasing in advertisement, yes or no, then discount, then product lines, or what, appointment of salesman. After the organization has listed down all the alternative in order to achieve the desired objective, it must evaluate each and every alternative. What are the positive or negative points in case of increasing expenditure on advertisement? What are the positive and negative points if the organization is giving discount? What are the negative and positive points if the organization is introducing new product lines? What are the negative and positive points if the organization is hiring a salesman in order to sell the product from door to door. So in this way, the organization will evaluate each and every alternative, and they will write down all the positive and negative points of each and every alternatives. Clear? Next, selecting the best alternative. The best alternative is selected, but as such, there is no mathematical formula to select the best alternative. Sometimes, instead of selecting one alternative, a combination of different alternatives can also be selected. The most ideal plan is most feasible, profitable, and with least negative consequences. For example, in order to increase the sales, the manager decides to offer discount and appointment of salesman for door-to-door sales. Clear? Now, after the organization has listed down the various alternatives in order to achieve their objective, after they have evaluated those alternatives and they have written down the positive and negative points of each and every alternative, the next step that the organization must do in the planning process is selecting the best alternative for the organization, which will help the organization to achieve the desired objective. The organization will select that particular alternative or alternatives. Clear? Now, there is no mathematical formula which will facilitate the selecting process of the alternatives. So, what the organization can do is, instead of opting for only one alternative, the organization can select a combination of two or more alternatives in order to achieve the desired objectives. Okay, now the most ideal alternative are the alternative which is feasible, which is profitable, and with least negative consequences towards the organization. For example, which I have given to you earlier, from the various list of alternative, the organization has selected this alternative to offer more discount, and this particular alternative to appoint salesman for door-to-door sales. These are the best alternative which the organization have selected. Clear? Next, implementing the plan. This is the step where other managerial functions comes into the picture. This step is concerned with doing what is required. In this step, managers communicate the plan to the employees clearly to convert the plans into action. After communicating the plan to the employees and taking their support, the manager starts allocating the resources according to the specification of the plans. For example, if the plan is to increase the sale by offering discount and increasing expenditure in advertisement, then to put into action, the managers must allot more funds to advertisement department, select better media, hire advertising agency, etc. After the organization has selected the best alternative and they have made a plan, the plan will not be successful until and unless it is implemented. Now, how will the managers implement the plan? The managers can implement the plan by communicating the plan to the employees and taking the support of the managers and start doing the appropriate actions. For example, if the plan is to increase the sale by offering discount and increasing expenditure in advertisement, then they have to put these plans into action first by doing what? By communicating with their employees and allocate the resources appropriately. How will they allocate the resources appropriately? If the plan is to increase the expenditure on advertisement, the managers must allot more funds to the advertisement department, select better media, hire advertising agency, etc. Okay, so a plan cannot be successful unless and until it is implemented. Next, follow up. The last step in the planning process is the follow up. Monitoring the plan constantly and taking feedback at regular intervals is called follow up. Monitoring of plans is very important to ensure that the plans are being implemented according to the schedule. Regular checks and comparison of the results with set standards are done to ensure that objectives are achieved. For example, a proper feedback mechanism was developed by a mobile phone company through its branches so that the actual customer response, revenue collection, employees response, etc. could be known. Okay, now what happened is after the plan which the organization has made has been implemented, the duty of the managers does not end there. The duty of the managers is to make sure that the plan is working and it is giving them the desired results. How can they do that? By conducting a follow-up. The managers must regularly check whether the plans which they have implemented is working or not, and check whether the results are in correlation with the standard that they have set. So the job of the managers does not end after the plan have been implemented. They have to conduct a follow-up by monitoring the plans constantly or regularly and make sure that the plan is working and giving them the desired results. Okay, so this is the last step of planning process. We have come to the end of our lecture. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you are liking the lectures and we will be uploading more videos like this. Thank you.